Hello, I'm Aiden Lewis, a NERFA staff member, and I am beyond excited to reintroduce the NERFA 2021 conference panel, Defining Your Career in Music. Backed by popular demand, we've decided to re-stream this panel in hopes that the general public gets as much out of it as our conference attendees did this past fall. We have Biff Kennedy from Charterhouse Music Group, Sarah Atkinson from Soundbox Music, Ralph Jacadine from Ralph Jacadine Management, and Carrie Estrin from Carrie Estrin Management. I hope you enjoyed the panel, and please join us for the post-panel Zoom discussion following the stream. Just click the button below and it will take you straight to the Zoom room. We're hoping to see you there.
Let's start with where we earn a living in music in today's world. I think I broke it down into about a dozen different categories, and I'm going to walk through these and ask some of our panelists here today if they can address, in terms of the artists that they represent, how that fits together in terms of the overall scheme of what they do during the day. If I may start with Carrie Estrin in Nashville for this one. Can you tell me about some of your artists, your clients, in your holistic approach in terms of writing music today and how that may have changed over the last 2 years?
I think a lot of clients have actually focused in more on the writing because they're not as concerned about touring, and they would like to be concerned about touring, but they instead don't have all the busy work. So that has produced a lot of new records in the pandemic, and now a flood of them. So one of that things is that people have worked more on their writing. But the other thing that's been interesting is there's been more writing collaboration. One of my clients I was talking to, they were working on a record, and the pandemic hit, and they shift focus, and they decided to start co-writing. And they had this great opportunity. And there's been a lot of Zoom activity, either through agencies getting their people together or individual Zoom groups. One of my clients, Rod Abernathy, started a Zoom group for musicians. What happened was people were making intimate connections even though they couldn't see each other in person. So that spawned a lot of that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I would turn to Ralph next and ask him, if he could comfortably, tell me how Livingston Taylor spends his day in November of 2021.
God, I remember in the middle of the pandemic, we were at a Trader Joe's together, and they had arrows. You got to go this way, you got to go that way, you got to be apart. And Livingston went up the wrong way. And some kid came up to Livingston and says, "Oh, excuse me, sir, you're going the wrong way." And he goes, "Oh, thank you very much." And I was behind Livingston, and he goes to me with this big mask on. He goes, "Ralph, I'm going crazy. I need to get out on the road." And he had like Mad Men things, like, he needed to get out on the road. So Livingston directed me to tell the booking agent, Seth, like, whatever opportunities out there, I want to get out on the road. And he's vaxxed, he's double vaxxed, he has his booster, and he wanted to go out and see his audience. So we were doing shows. If it's a 300 capacity room, there would be 75 people or 80 people. He wanted to get engaged with them, and he's comforting and he's entertaining, and it's everything. And it's an older audience. So to get the older audience out to see Livingston, and they did. They came out. And he took care of his audience really well. And so he wanted to play as much as possible. And he had some creative partnerships. He took care of himself. He really took care of himself because he had time. He had time to do that. So he was with his family a lot. He was helping his students a lot. And, in a situation like this, as a manager, when my income is derived 100% on basically 90% on touring, my artist touring, all my artists came to me, and every month they wrote checks to keep us in business.
Wow.
Because we were still working, we were still promoting, we were still arranging things and supporting our artists, but we didn't have any compensation. So all of them wrote checks every single month, and they still do, to keep us in business. And boy, I'll tell you that that in the government's help has kept us in business. So I wasn't in a situation where I'm panicking. I was in a situation, let's take advantage of that. So we started a television show. We started Patreon. We started, we're doing a video series, a company called True Fire. We're doing all these things. We have a cruise going up. We have overnight weekends where he teaches stagecraft. And he's doing all kinds of things, and it's a joy. It's a joy.
Everyone shifts gears and does what they have to do to, I think, stay active and kind of stay out on the edge of their creative process.
And it's the kind of thing, like everybody's hurting, everybody's panicked, everybody's very emotional, and then we're saying, but we're healthy, and we still have things to do. So let's figure out what we can do.
Did Livingston adopt any live streaming in terms of his daily, weekly, monthly activities?
Yeah, every Tuesday he had a show on Facebook Live, and it would be a half-hour show. So he would have, and he did it from his house on Martha's Vineyard. So there's always interesting people on the vineyard coming and going. So there was comedians and there was celebrities and there's people, but it's a half-hour show. It's a little bit like Mr. Rogers. It's folky, it's homey, it's comforting, it's fun, it's entertaining. So that's what we did. And every week we had a couple hundred people, and we formed a community, and they would chat with each other. And that's what we decided to do every single week.
Yes, I have found a number of artists that have done the same. I think Vance Gilbert is in his 85th week of his Monday night live stream, which can go for several hours. In fact, 2 weeks ago, he debuted what he hopes to be his next album, sort of start to finish on his live stream, seeking audience reaction. Yeah. Susan Warner, another one who is not doing it right now because she's back on the road, but week after week after week, she would gather on Sunday night, special guests, collaborations, have some fun, dress up, all kinds of crazy things in an effort to keep it fresh and generate some revenue, which it does.
Yeah.
Right. Sarah, if I may turn to you, can you tell me about the touring situation for musicians in the Atlantic provinces at this moment?
Yeah, so we have been very fortunate in the Atlantic provinces. We've been able to go back to relatively normal for a while now. There were restrictions between provinces, so not being able to tour outside of your home province. But luckily, we've been able to open that up. And for a good long while, we had an Atlantic bubble. So it meant that you could go from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland. And so all of these artists were really sharing with each other and sharing the joy of being able to just get out and perform again. And we're definitely seeing the return and the support for our local artists. I know on the festival side, everyone is reaching out and just really supporting the local artists and making these East Coast tours happen.
Can artists transfer provinces at this point in time?
They can, yes.
And are you booking festivals for next spring and summer yet?
Yeah, so things are starting to slowly pick up in terms of booking for artists. I also actually work for a festival here in Halifax, and definitely looking ahead to the summer and being excited about that again. I think everyone is just roaring to go, and we want to see live music, and we're having these little glimpses of what an event can be like again, and it's just sparking that fire in all of us just to get going and to put music back at the front. And obviously over the last 2 years, music has been the thing that has carried a lot of people through this very difficult time. So I think more than ever, we're seeing support from outside of the music community, trying to help all of our artists and our events really shine.
Were your artists live streaming in the past 20 months?
Yeah, so definitely some live stream. We have a few artists that were doing the regular live streams, and that, as Ralph said, kind of became the, that weekly check-in for half an hour to an hour on a Friday night, and it
Mhm.
became a regular thing and really helped out a lot of music listeners throughout it. I think those live streams have helped. My own company, we put on a St. Patrick's Day live stream. So with that Irish trad feel,
Mhm.
we were really able to, everyone missed and everyone wanted to go out for Paddy's Day. And yeah, it was just really great to be able to put that on and bring that to people's homes.
Great, thank you. If I may ask, is live streaming for your clients a financial gain for them?
Yeah, for some of them, it really depends on the artist. Some of them are just doing it to connect with their audience. And I
Mhm.
think you had talked about that big picture and that long-term plan. And that is really important, is building that connection with your audience so that when you're able to get out on the road or when you have a product to offer them, they're already your fan. They already want to support you in whatever way they can, and they're going to come out to your show. And other artists have offered something like a tip jar every week. And honestly, that has been a great source of revenue throughout the entire pandemic for them.
Great, beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to come back to Carrie for a minute, if I may. Can you tell me how radio marketing has changed for you over the course of the last 2 years, if it has changed?
Yes, it's changed quite a lot. And one of the things I'm going to say about having to deal with this pandemic is you have to reevaluate and adapt and then go forward. And that's exactly what I did. So I kept promoting right through the pandemic. In fact, Judd Caswell, who's here today, had an album go out just during March 2020. And it did fabulously well because people had stopped sending music. It was just crazy. I mean, he had a great album, but he was the last artist I sent out the degree of albums that I sent out. And what happened during that time period in March was a lot of the radio stations were offline. The specialty shows were offline. And so I kind of evaluated that and I went back with a more curated list. But I did promise all the DJs records while they were off,
Mhm.
because I didn't want them to kind of not be in our community and know what was going on. And then over the months, some DJs got disgusted with being off the air and learned how to use, OBS and different ways to put on their shows from home. So one of the biggest switches was digital. The interesting thing, you mentioned John McCutcheon. He came out with an album called Cabin Fever: Songs from the Quarantine, and it was just John and the guitar.
It was brilliant.
Thank you. It was
Brilliant.
amazing, right? And
It is.
personal album. And he said, I don't have any money to reproduce these. And so I said, well, let's send it out digitally. Let's see what we can do. And it was a learning process to promote that album digitally. I did go back to, I had to notice which DJs couldn't adapt, who were fans of his. And it did get to be #1 as a digital album, which was actually not easy. But there were more and more albums being produced in this time period because, as I said earlier, artists had times to write. I think radio is forever changed. I think all of us in this community are forever changed technically, but for radio, it drug some of us kicking and streaming into more technical things that we didn't do before. And now the other thing that happened was artists started writing singles and they had to get them out there. And that was kind of rare before. And radio didn't really want an EP or a single.
Mhm.
The first one that came to me was someone I'm sure you know, Danny Schmidt. And
Yes.
he wrote a song specifically about the pandemic. And he goes, I just want to get it out there. Well, I'd never done anything like that before. So I started promoting digital singles, and they were going to the top of the charts because enough DJs that could adapt to that really wanted to play this music because, as Ron Olesko, to quote him, especially, but these songs have a short shelf life and they're immediate and important. So immediacy in getting records out was a big deal. And I think that it's forever changed now. There's going to be more digital, there's more singles, there's more EPs. And I think the less busyness that we all have to face helped artists to refocus on their art, which, as we all say, the song comes first, everything comes from there. And so
Yes.
that's been a real positive.
Yes, I have found with my clients as well that it gave many of them an opportunity to focus more on the writing. I represent Rachel Garland in San Francisco. She dedicated the month of February, which is Artist Writing Month, to writing a song every day. She wrote 9 songs, debuted them every night as a work in progress on Facebook, and then the next day started again and wrote another one. A huge burst of creativity, followed by an opportunity to make videos from many of those songs. We switched to an EP format with Rachel. She has recorded 3 EPs. The first one came out in July. The second one is coming out in January. And I have a feeling by the time we get to the third one, she will have written another album's worth of material. So I don't know quite how that's going to play out. I found with working with the DJs as well, many of them could not get into their radio stations. So they figured out how to broadcast from home. And it just changed my mailing list from the radio station to their home address, which I was happy to do. And yes, it did, I think, force more DJs to decide, okay, I'm going to have to deal with digital if I really want all this music and I want it in a timely fashion.
Right. And I think you may have noticed this with your own clients as well. They were more spare. The album production was more spare, and that was embraced as well. You didn't have to, it's always good to have a certain amount of production to enhance your song, but people really understood that you couldn't get back into the studio, or that you were recording from home, or that you could only bounce a few tracks. So I think we're all very much more accepting, and we're still dealing with a glut of pandemic records still being released. Because we all had a lot to express and say, and I'm just so grateful that Biff, that you and I and others like us could get this music to the DJs.
Yes, and they would figure out a way to keep their program on the air and help us, continue to expose that music to their audience. Yeah, they did an admirable job from Ron Olesko all the way down the line. Yes.
Yep.
Really, really did well. I think an area where Ralph has had some excellent experience over the years is in music licensing to film and television. If I may ask, Ralph, how, if at all, did that change over the course of the last 20 months?
I think it was highly competitive because that's where the dollars were.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people were understanding that's where the dollars are and how to get the songs to the right people. And there's the outlets of making money through your song placements is gone through the roof, with television shows, with Amazon, with Netflix, with the web in general. So there's a lot of music making money for people through placements. And another thing is, the Farrelly brothers, who have a whole bunch of great comedies as well as the Green Book that came out, their movies are played all the time now. So during the pandemic, I found that the Jim Carrey movies and
Wow.
the Farrelly brothers movies, people want comedy, they want a relief. So they were getting played a lot. So my artists that got placements in those movies were making money because people wanted comedy, they wanted something light. But that's where my students at Berklee are really focused on, film and television, but they don't have the context or the name. Mm-hmm. So they're making a name and they're getting context for themselves on TikTok or Twitch or through social media. And they're really good at figuring out how to get attention on social media. And then music supervisors are coming to them that way, because they're blowing up something. I have students with millions of hits and millions of fans, and all of a sudden they're being bombarded by labels and producers and film and television people. So that it's very much alive if you figure out that game, and it starts with getting attention for yourself. And because getting connected to a Farrelly brothers or whoever's doing the music supervision is tough. And they're bombarded, and they have walls around them.
Yes.
So, but if you're getting a lot of attention online, your phone will ring, metaphorically speaking.
Yes. Thank you. If I may, could you give our participants here today any kind of a sense as to what a music placement in a film or a television program is equal to in a financial way, without really revealing any particular artist? I know Ellis Paul had great success with the Fairley Brothers over the years.
Yeah.
I just want to let people know in terms of where pockets where you can make money in 2021. Should I anticipate $1,000 for a placement, $5,000 for a placement, $25,000 for a placement? And again, I know it's partly based on the use, if it's in the opening or the closing, the length of the piece that's used. I'm just curious to know if you could give our listeners some kind of a ballpark as to what they could anticipate with a successful placement.
Yeah, it is all over the place.
Yeah.
And the Fairley Brothers are friends of mine. So I remember that I think it was the Me, Myself, and Irene placement that Ellis had.
Yes.
And it was all over the movie. It was 9 times it showed up, and it was the end title credit, and it was a big deal. And we got it was I forget the numbers, but it was a little bit more than 50,000, probably between 50 and 70,000 for like, this is the check you're going to get. And this is like, the buddy deal. And then a week before the movie came out, they did a license deal with Neil Young for a song, and they gave him like $200,000 or something. And the music supervisor said, we can't pay that. We got to cut it in half. And are you okay with that? And I said, absolutely. If I knew what this movie placement would do to Ellis Paul's financial situation in his career, I would have paid 30 grand or 25 grand for that placement. But it's amazing. If you hit with a good movie that gets seen and gets on television and the movie theaters, you make a lot of money. So that's something that and another thing is, I have all my students go to colleges. They all have people making videos and making commercials and making indie movies. To get a relationship with these folks and to license your music for free, with an understanding, you have my music, and if you're going to make money from it or you're getting distribution, then we'll renegotiate it. But I want you to use my music. Mm-hmm. And these are relationships that are starting young. They're starting like college or post-college, and with musicians and film directors or video directors kind of getting together and partnering. And one of them might become a Peter Fairley, you never know, or work for an ad agency or a brand or something like that.
Yes.
But those relationships are really important.
I have found in my experience with the limited number of licensing successes that I've had, that once you establish with a music supervisor that you are organized, you can clear the songs, you can respond immediately, and you can kind of swing with their vision of where the song fits, or maybe it doesn't fit at the very last minute. You become one of their go-to people. And when the next project comes along, you'll be more likely to get a call saying, I have a moment here. I'm looking for a particular piece of music, and they know they can depend on you to deliver something and deliver it cleared and legal to help them plug it in before they go home at the end of the night.
And Biff, I'm tired of saying this to my artists and my students, but it's all about the relationships.
Yes.
When I met the Fairley Brothers, they were doing other things. Peter was a waiter. He was selling cargo ship space and doing all these things. And we drank beer together, and we laughed, and we had fun together. Mm-hmm. And it started as a friendship. And as I evolved in my musical career, he evolved in Los Angeles. And after 7 years, he was able to make Dumb and Dumber. And then he became an A-list director. That doesn't happen too often, but it did. And it happened to a buddy of mine. So, and he treats his friends well. If I may.
Yes, please.
Before this conference, there was I guess one of the sponsors, B&H in New York City. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you or other people saw that. It was a couple minutes long. It was a brilliant ad. It was made really well. It got my attention. But if anybody knows the company B&H in New York, they sell cameras and other things.
Yes.
They've been around 51 years. If you want to have a career, study a business like that. They are not open on Saturday. you can't be in the retail business and not open on Saturday. It's hard to be in the retail business in New York City with anything. But they morph.
And it's not a chain.
They morph. They change. They're selling around the world. They're on the web. They sell drones now. They give away free candy. But it's an amazing business. Like, you don't have to go in the music business to get examples of people that can survive and do well. And they're everywhere. And those artists like the Ellis Paul or Livingston Taylor or Susan Warner that have survived all these years, people should be studying their careers because they've been doing things right for a long time. And it has to do with they have fans and a network that won't let them fall, that have supported them.
Yes, I totally agree. And thank you for making an addendum to that conversation to make note of how clever B&H turns out to be with their advertising. Yeah, and the fact that they're closed on Saturday.
It's so funny. It got my attention because I know the store a little, and but people should study that. It was a great ad unto itself, and it was funny, and it kept my attention, which is hard.
Yeah, it was funny, and I've seen it multiple times here in some of the NERFA things. They've been a great supporter of NERFA over the past 2 years. I'm actually scrambling. Here we go. I'm looking for Susan Werner is one of the people that I asked to complete our survey, and she was very forthcoming with information about her current status and her loves and her fears, if you will. And I will share with everybody, if I could, if you'll indulge me a minute of reading, some of the things that Susan had to say from the survey that I asked her. I asked her how much time she spends by percentage devoted to various functions of our day-to-day business. She told me that 20% of her time is spent writing and arranging over the course of the last 2 years. Touring is now back to 55% of her time spent over the course of a regular month. She has reduced her live streaming to about 5% of her day. She spends about 15% of her day doing administrative work, collecting royalties, paying her team, taking care of her taxes. All of that is now up to about 15% of her day. And we're going to come back to Carrie on this in a minute. She apparently spends about 5% of her time in social media marketing. So I asked Susan, what brings you the most joy from all of these activities? And she said very clearly, as everyone did, live shows are still where the fun is for me, always. I asked her, why do you do this? And how has your mission changed over the years? And this is what she said. I probably used to aspire to great artistry of some sort. Now I'm more comfortable with being an entertainer and trusting that does something important too for an audience. The pandemic and the live streams really taught me how, when people are going through a tough time, they really appreciate a bit of relief. Why make a painful moment even more painful? I asked her about some of her influences, some of the people that she looked towards when she first started in the music business. She cited Chris Smither, Richard Thompson, Rodney Crowell, and Max Roach. I'm not quite sure where that one came from, but this is what musicians do. They're influenced by other people. I saw an interview recently with a guitar player who was asked, do you like to play with other guitar players? He said, not really. I'm not comfortable with that. I like to play with drummers. I'm a rhythm-driven guitar player. And for me, the jamming is not with other string players. It's with a drummer. So I figured that may be more where Susan came up with some of the more creative people that she has looked to over the years. Thank you for that, Ralph. If I could come back to Carrie for a moment, can you tell me if your artists' business administrative work is done by you, or if they have managers or business managers that help them with their royalty collection, with their taxes, with all the paperwork that comes along with trying to administer your own business today? Is that something you get involved in?
No, I don't. I'm I am like a manager, but I'm not a day-to-day manager. So I help artists to discover who they need to have on their team, how to prioritize what they're doing. But it is interesting that you bring this up, because one of the things that I have stressed with artists, because as I've said, you're out on the road, you're trying to get people to your gig, you're dealing with merch and reordering and loading your car and cleaning your car, is one of the things I've really stressed is looking at your infrastructure and taking the time now that you're home to do that. So anything simple from like, how do you set up your office, to what have you done with all those gig leads? Well, they're scattered all over my desk. I'm like, well, let's get some database management here. One thing I am a fan of doing is trying to help people add people to their team. So a lot of the artists I work with, some have business managers, but some have someone who deals with their taxes or deals, but sometimes I'll say, you don't need to do that. You could get a bookkeeper to do that. That's, not for you to do at this point. Mm-hmm. Some people hire support for social media. Now I do work with artists to try to help them with the content and the ideas and the engagement aspect of their social media. And I know Sarah will probably talk a lot more about that. So for, the advantage for some of the, like Ralph was saying, these, and you're saying, artists that have been on the road, of course, they want to get back out on the road. For a lot of artists that didn't have those gigs before the pandemic, this has been a really incredible time to build that fan engagement, to build your infrastructure, to get all these things that you're just asking me about settled out, who does what task, and to get organized, because I had one artist, he had gig leads all over his desk. I'm like, okay, let's gather them up, put them in one place. Let's put them into a database. Mm-hmm. Let's do that with your mailing list. Let's do that with your merch. When I say to an artist, how many CDs did you sell last year, or t-shirts or whatever, they have no idea. I said, let's look at a way to get this record keeping together. So adding people to your team and your infrastructure is so important. For these artists who haven't had the gigs and who are trying to get back out there this winter, that's going to be a hard thing, because some clubs have rebooked for 4 times, the Susan Warners or the John McCutcheons or the Livingston Taylors, and they have to get them back in their schedule. So this winter is still a great time to not only do your infrastructure, but to work on your social media. And more importantly, and as we've all stressed, fan engagement. You just don't do a social media post. How do you involve your fan base or those that follow you into sharing for themselves? And I think we've all said this on the call so far. It's so important to serve those who care about you. And that we have another winter for those of us that haven't been out there touring and have all those gigs to rebook. Yes, start booking for this spring and everything, but strengthen your numbers, strengthen your engagement, your loyalty, and get your infrastructure together so you can take off next year.
Great, thank you. If I may ask, do you engage social media companies, or do you train your artists to do that themselves?
I do both. One of the things that I've been doing this past year is I'm creating a team of professionals around me. So if someone says that, I say, here, just call this person, you don't have to do that. So if someone has to do social media and I work with them on the content, they just may go off and they're fine. But I have worked with different social media companies on different projects. And so I refer out. If someone needs a graphic designer, I refer out for that. The last person I've just added to the team is someone who can do all your copyright and registering and sign you up with all your PROs, because, that's a lot of work. And so I actually helped him form a business doing that. And I said, look, I'm going to start sending you clients. I have tried to find resources and ways that the artists can have a new member of their team come on. I work with them as the strategist. But yeah, it's good to say, this part is hard for me. Where do I get help?
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I would like to go back to Sarah in Nova Scotia. Could we talk a bit about social media marketing? I believe that is one of your strengths, one of your specialties, if you will, in the modern world. Do you work directly with your artists for social media, or do you engage an outside organization?
So we work with the artists. So this
Okay.
is kind of the part that really gets me excited and it absolutely turns into like the nerd moment of the business side. And even just what Carrie was saying in terms of setting the artists up with their business and making sure that they have that infrastructure, that is exactly what I want to happen. So that applies to social media as well. For me, it doesn't help to hand your social media over to someone else. That doesn't help the artist, that doesn't connect with any fan.
Mhm.
And so that is the last thing that I want to do. So being able to set up the artist, work with them, and a lot of the time I find that musicians, they get stuck. There's that, writer's block of I don't even know where to begin.
Mhm.
And so the fact that I can come and step in with some of the templates that I have and just map out what their release strategy looks like and see, okay, if we're putting the album here, what other shows do you have? And all of a sudden we start placing these key events or dates in, and the artist starts to realize that they actually have probably more than 50% of their content already there, and it just removes that barrier. Then I can step in and do some suggested posts, or have you thought about, in the car on the road, kind of
Mhm.
behind the scenes looks, what are we doing to connect, little, yeah, in the studio looks as well, and prompt them with that. And even if I am putting in some ideas into that social media calendar, for me, it's always about the artist then going and taking that suggestion, making it in their own voice, and
Yes.
posting it to connect with their artist.
Yes.
I think we can probably all remember different artists where you go, oh, you see post and you go, you have someone else doing that. That is not your
Yeah.
voice. And that is the last thing that I want to do.
Yeah, that's worse than not posting at all, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yes.
People can understand if you're a busy musician or you're on the road and you haven't understood that, but to pass it over to someone who doesn't care for their audience the way that you do,
Mhm.
that's kind of the unforgivable.
Yeah. And I think you can tell the tone when it's someone posting for you and are working off of a template and they're just plugging you into today's post, whatever that might be.
Exactly.
Ralph mentioned both TikTok and Twitch as two of the platforms that his students are having success with. Do you have a favorite, Sarah, in terms of a platform that seems to reach the best?
I definitely think TikTok obviously has exploded, and I think it really depends on who your audience is as well and what genre you're
Yes,
working in.
yes.
Uh, TikTok, you you look at any of the charts or the top hits in Canada right now, and most of them are the songs that you hear on TikTok. So it's translating across the platforms. It's not just whatever's happening in TikTok land
Hmm.
is staying there.
Hmm.
It is becoming the top charts. So you can't ignore it.
The last time I looked at a TikTok chart specifically,
Mhm.
I think of the top 10 most popular songs on TikTok, like six of them were the same song, covered by six different artists doing their interpretation of the song. That
Yeah.
seems to be part of the TikTok thing, is that you're somehow engaging with other people's music.
Well, and those songs, like we're all singing them in our daily lives, doing the dishes and
Hmm.
walking the dog. We're they're stuck in our heads. They're there. They've made their mark.
And they seem to be well received on that platform as well.
Mhm.
I'm guessing you use Instagram and Facebook and
All of the above.
all the usual suspects.
Yeah.
And when you put a strategy together, it would include postings maybe the same or maybe slightly different for each of those platforms.
Yeah, so very different platforms. So you're going to use them, you're going to communicate in a different way. Facebook, you need to look at who the audience is following you on Facebook. It's these days it's an older crowd
Mhm.
is on the Facebook platform. Instagram, again, there's a difference between what you're posting in your feed and what you're posting in the stories, and how you communicate with your audience that way. And yeah, being able to, again, mapping out your plan, mapping out your calendar, and you know what you want to say, but it's going to be delivered slightly different on each platform.
Okay. When you map out a plan, if I may continue with this thread for a second, when you map out your plan, are you talking about a 1 week plan, a 1 month plan, a 3 month plan? How far in advance can you help the artist set up where they're going based on their either their touring or their music releases?
Yeah, I mean, what is the ideal versus what happens? I think
Yeah.
there's two
Yes.
different situations there. Ideally, I would love that 3-month plan. I am a big picture person. I want to see what's going on, and again, what can we be looking ahead to start prepping or teasing out so that it becomes, one of your audience's favorites. If you can do month by month, I find a lot of artists, again, if you're getting stuck with, I don't know how to do 3 months, 6 months,
Mhm.
just break it down for a month. Sit down, take one afternoon and sit down and just map out that month. So there's no right or wrong. If you can map out 1 month, that's great. If you can map out three, even better. Uh, yeah, that's I always like a little bit more time, but I know that's not always the case. And yeah, the ideal versus what actually happens
Yes.
doesn't always line up.
I've certainly experienced that.
Yeah,
Yeah. The master plan versus the actual plan.
yeah.
Yeah. If I may ask, can you generate revenue from posting on TikTok and Instagram and Spotify, Canvas, and Reels and all of that?
So there's some differences between Canada and the US. I know US, your content creators can make money,
Mhm.
which is not always the same in Canada in terms of our content creators. And so they are looking towards advertising models or sponsorship deals
Mhm.
in terms of making revenue off of those platforms.
Okay. Let me stay on that because I was going to come back to that in a minute, but let's stay on that for now. Do you write grants for organizations like Factor?
Oh, absolutely. Very, very happy that Canada's funding system is so supportive. Uh, for us, each province tends to have their own music industry association, their
Hmm.
MIA. And
Interesting.
so there's funding applications there at that level, uh, municipal funding applications. You can look to the city or to like Arts Nova Scotia for us. And then going bigger as well. So looking at Factor and what are your options there. And Canada Council, obviously a great supporter as well. But Factor, that's usually for artists with that strategic planning. I think about, they have that tiered system in terms of your artist rating or profile and what are the goals that you need to accomplish in order to get to the next step. So taking a look at those and really working towards those in your bigger strategy and bigger plan.
So you would sit down with an artist and help them kind of collate their current status and
Yeah.
their touring success, their music sales success, streaming success, and put that as part of the grant writing program in an effort to get funding to tour or funding to record or both.
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 Okay.
Record, marketing, touring, video, showcase support, any or all of the above. Definitely, that is one of the very first things that I do is sit down with an artist and just have that conversation, chat with them. Where are they currently?
Mhm.
My company sends out like a nice little intake form to figure out, what the artist's goals are. I think that one gets missed a lot.
Yes.
Somebody want to be on the road all the time, or do they not? Figuring that out nice and early, and
Mhm.
then building a plan that works with them.
Great. Thank you. On that note, if I could come back to Ralph, do you work with artists who prefer to write rather than to tour or record?
You know, no. Yeah, I have worked with both, but
In the
most
past,
of my
yes.
artists write their songs or co-write their songs, and they get out on the road. And yeah, that's what I'm used to. Biff, if I may, about the social media stuff.
Yes, sir.
You got to master the platform for your fan group, and so for Livingston Taylor, it's Instagram, it's Facebook.
Mhm.
For the younger artist, it's TikTok in Instagram's Reels and things like that.
Yes.
But I noticed get your ideas. Just go out and get all the ideas. They're out there. There's people doing creative things. This morning I woke up and I checked. For some reason, Mick Jagger's Twitter account comes to me every morning. I think we're friends or something. But he posted the most amazing video of him on stage during a show. And he's on stage, somebody put the guitar around him, and he put out his hand, they put talcum powder, and he looked so nervous. He had this intensity to his face, and he's kind of strumming, and something's not right. And then he goes into his wireless and he clicks something and he goes, okay. And then it was making noise. And then he puts his head back and he walks out on stage. And it was a half minute of Mick Jagger, very concerned, kind of freaking out when he wasn't getting sound, put his head back, and then he strutted out for the song. And that's Mick Jagger. He's 70 some years old, and somebody's putting out great Mick Jagger content. And, I see on Thursday of this week, Instagram, I think I could say this, has introduced a program at Berklee College of Music where they're finding content people, content creators that are artists, and they're actually funding them. And they're giving them a team of the top people at Instagram Reels to make their videos better and to make them more viral and to go right head to head with TikTok. So they're putting a lot of money to get content on these things. And my students, the younger demos, I remember I had a Zoom class of 25 people on the screen, and one guy in the middle. Every class he would be like this, and he would yawn. And the yawns on Zoom, the yawns are so big. And I said, Ben, what's going on with you? And he goes, I'm exhausted. And I go, what? Why? And he goes, well, I'm releasing a song next week, and I'm working all day, all night. And I said, what does that mean? Because he's releasing a song on TikTok. And I said, what do you stay awake? Mm-hmm. And what he did, he has a partner, and they're a pop duo, and they were going to graduate from Berklee. So they went to their parents, and they calculated, because the graduation was virtual, how much money the parents would save not coming up to Boston for the graduation. So it came down to $5,000 each. Ben's not going to get a suit or shoes. They're not going to get a hotel room, dinners, flights, all that stuff. So it's about $5,000 each. So the two students got $5,000 each from their parents. So they had $10,000 to go to TikTok to promote their song. And my mind was completely blown. I said, what are you doing? And he said they get influencers in around the 400,000 to 6 million followers. They're getting those people. Mm-hmm. And they're going to them and saying, here's my song. If you put it in, if you spread the song, you get cash payments according to how many people see it. And they went through 3 months of this, went through the $10,000, and at the end, their song had millions of impressions, listens. And last I talked to Ben, he had several publishing companies and most of the major labels calling him about working for them. And they put their money on the line, and it was a great song, and it hit. And it kind of took off virally. And man, all these companies are set up to snap up these artists because they're young, they have an audience, they know how to do it, and they're signing deals. Yeah, it blew my mind. And then what could we learn in the folk and acoustic world? Well, everything. Because in a couple of years, everybody's going to be doing that, probably. Like when Facebook came out. Like, what's Facebook? What do you do? What's Instagram? And eventually we'll get to it. Mm-hmm. But of all the changes in technology, I think the best thing to do is get an email list. That you own, it won't go away, and it's gold. It's directly going to your fans.
Totally agree. In my opinion, the most valuable social element you have is your email list because they gave you the address.
That's right.
Yes, I totally agree. Thank you for sharing that. And as it turns out, you can generate revenue in those communities, especially if you're young and you speak the language and you can work the technology. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great. Ralph, if I could stay with you for a moment. As a teacher yourself and someone who represents teachers who are musicians as well. Can you tell our participants today how much, let's say for Livingston Taylor, for example, how much of his time is devoted to teaching in today's world?
Well, you know, he had decades at Berklee College of Music.
Yes.
And when the pandemic hit, he decided that he's going to try to do a lot of other things. And we're setting up our Livingston Taylor workshops. We're doing one this summer. We do them every year. It's a couple days, but we're going to be doing that a lot more. And then this next week, he's shooting a series for a company called True Fire down in Florida. And it's a series for stage performance. So, you know, I would go to his class at Berklee, and he would get his friends in. You know, that could be Steven Tyler, it could be his brother, James Taylor, Jimmy Buffett or something. And there's 30 people in the class, and it's an amazing class, like mind-blowing class. And then it goes away. And it's just like the fact that it's not taped with James Taylor and Livingston Taylor talking about stagecraft, it's amazing. So Livingston's going to be taping these things and having, of course, doing everything online, which makes sense. And but he loves to teach. And, you know, Rebecca loves to teach, and this other artist, Kemp Harris and Ellis Paul, they love to teach, and they're really good at it. And I think at a certain stage in our careers, teaching is fun, and it's service. And selfishly, as you mentioned, it's our superpower. Man, if we can learn from people, beginners, and people that know technology, which is everybody, you know, we're ahead of the game. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it boosts our cred, if nothing else, to be able to speak that language and travel in those circles.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Kemp?
Yeah, Kemp Harris. He came to me. There's a big shot person who had a company called Echo Nest. His name is Jim Lucchese. He was the CEO of the company. He sold the company, it was Boston-based, to Spotify for $100 million. So he comes to Berklee to give talks, and he's a great guy. He's a lawyer. He's smart. And I met with him. He's a brilliant guy. And I met with him, and he said, "Hey, Ralph, if you're available tomorrow night, I would like you to hear this guy, Kemp Harris." And I go, "Sure. Tell me about him." And he goes, "Well, I'm his drummer." And I go, "You're in a band?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've been playing with Kemp for 20 years.
Wow.
So I went to see the band, and Kemp is just retired after 40 years of teaching public schools in Newton. And he's a soulful Black man that was born in North Carolina, and he came up to the Boston area. And he is absolutely a soulful, amazing guy. He's blowing people away. And 2 years ago, he resigned when he was 65 or 63 or something. So he has time to be a full-time musician. It's a little bit like the Charles Bradley story, if you know Charles Bradley, who's and he's laid on, but he's the real deal. So and Kemp, you know, his income, he has 2 or 3 schools that he goes to a week, and you can make $100 to $1,000 every time you go to these schools and present programs. So there's good cash there, and he's beloved. And you know, it's really fun to manage him. We're having a great time. Yeah.
So does he go out on the road as a touring artist, or he is working mostly in the Boston area?
He like from Washington D.C. on up.
Okay.
And he plays solo or the band. It depends on what. But it's really fun. And the bands, they're like amazing musicians. You know, and Jim, the drummer, is now the CEO of Sofar Sounds.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's a promoter of house concerts.
Yes.
The biggest promoter in the world, by the way.
Yes,
you know,
they are.
Concerts around the world, and they moved the company from London to Boston area. Great company. So
I've had
the
privilege.
I'm working with a friend.
Yeah, that's even better. I've had the opportunity to have multiple artists that I represent in some capacity do Sofar Sounds shows in the craziest, most extreme locations. And, you know, if you get 30, 40 people to come out, first of all, you can make a little bit of money doing that. And you can connect with 30 or 40 people that will be with you for a long time with that kind of an intimate opportunity.
You know, and like Billie Eilish and, you know, Adele and people, you know, like a lot of big names started out playing Sofar Sound shows.
Yes.
It's really great. And it's great for my students at Berklee. It gives them an audience where there was none.
Mhm.
Mm.
Great. Yes, and thank you for mentioning the concept under the banner of teaching that you can go into schools and do this, libraries, community centers, and the budgets that they have set aside on a yearly basis to employ people to do this are generous. You can cover, maybe a soft night at Passim by one successful school presentation or library presentation, and come out with more money, and not have to worry about ticket sales and all of that, and still connect
Yeah.
with an audience.
And what Ellis Paul does masterfully is he put out a couple of kids' books for his daughters,
Mhm.
but we published them, we sold them,
Mhm.
and then we marketed to schools. So he could do a school program during the day, and at night go to a theater in the community or in the school, and the students love it, and their parents love it, and
Yes.
it's like marketing, but it's money and it's service. It's great. It
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense.
And in his case, it came from a very authentic source, which was he did it for his own family to start.
That's right. That's right.
That was the
Yeah.
inspiration. Yes.
If people want to know about creative things, they should just study Ellis's career. He's brilliant. Ellis
Mhm.
is a brilliant guy.
I learned about Truefire actually from Ellis originally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was signed as the first writer at Truefire.
Right. It was for guitar, and
Yes.
then guitar and bass, and then
Yes.
Ellis kind of got the songwriting, and Livingston's going to be doing stagecraft.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got over 1 million subscribers at Truefire.
That's right.
That's a
right.
lot of people you can reach in any given afternoon.
It's a company that's been around for 10 years, 1 million subscribers, and it's growing exponentially because of the pandemic. You
Yes.
could take lessons and be inspired from your computer,
Mhm.
and that's the new normal.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. If I could come back to Carrie for a moment, if you would share any of your experiences with a young band that you work with, like the Accidentals, and how you have successfully gotten them out and about into the folk music world.
Well, thanks for asking that. Yes, the Accidentals have played in more the AAA market, Americana market,
Mhm.
and during the pandemic, they started co-writing. They had once co-written with Kim Ritchie and Beth Nielsen Chapman, and then through their agency, they started writing once a week with Tom Paxton, which they're still doing. So
Wow.
they actually shelved their project. Which is out now, Vessel, which I did send to the folk DJs digitally, but they did something called Time Out Session 1. And it was co-written with, Beth and Kim and Dar and Mary Gaucher and others. And I sent that to the folk community. And it was really interesting because it was just an EP with 5 songs. And they had, great backstories and things like that. And they did a wonderful job. I tried to do my best job, and it actually got to number 2 because it was just so real, the content of it. So it's interesting because they switch genres, and then they came to me and they said, look, we have this thing that's going out to Americana and AAA, it's called Vessel. And I said, well, let's send me the CD, let me listen through it. And there were several songs, and I said, look, if you don't care about charting that much, let's just send out the whole CD. And so we didn't even have a full month to promote it. I got the links by like the 6th of the month. So it was, but the goal was that, I think some of the artists are finding a real resonance with the folk audience, especially through the pandemic, because our community is so cool. But Amber, their manager, told me this, we just talked 2 nights ago, and she said, what you did actually supported and lifted up the AAA and the Americana world.
Mhm.
And she says, I can see how it all works together that way. So it is very common to, sometimes I do a project with an Americana promoter, although I do some Americana friendly, and I'm sure you do this too, Biff. We've all worked with some of these promoters, but I think as people have stripped down and started getting into their songwriting more and more, they see this community, and we never had the kind of clout in the industry because we were folk and folk wasn't rebranded, but we are very strong, and other genres are coming to our format. And I think we all need to be proud of why they want to come to us.
I like that. Yes. And we certainly encourage them to come on down. Gary, while we are here together and we are rapidly running out of time, if I could put you on the spot, could you leave our audience today with a parting thought, a message you would like to send that we haven't gotten to in the last 90 minutes, something you want to make sure everyone here can take home as a nugget of your position?
Yes, well, thanks for asking that, Biff. The first thing I would say is give yourself permission to reevaluate the industry goalposts, to be willing to adapt and take chances, and then to innovate. And remember that you are more interesting than you know. Look deep into what you do because your fans want to know all about that. And it's really a time for creativity. So don't be afraid to reach out, get help, find others to add to your team. The business model is changing. It's just changing. And it's really important to look ahead at trends and see what's going on. And don't get stuck in just the touring because your fans can't get to every gig. And some of your fans may be older and they don't want to go to every gig, but you've already started a connection. So that the most important thing to think about is how to engage your fans, whether it's online or in front of an audience. And don't be afraid to try new things.
Beautiful. I may sign up for an hour with you myself. Sarah, if I could put you on the spot up there in Nova Scotia, where it's probably getting dark as it is here.
Oh, it got dark a long time ago here.
Okay. Is there a topic or a comment or a thought or a nugget you would like to share with everybody as our clock winds down here for the panel this afternoon?
Yeah, I think we briefly touched on it one of our previous conversations, but we're not in competition with each other. Music is beautiful and we should all be sharing that. Look to each other, right? So Ralph mentioned that, look to other artists, see what they're doing. And I always ask my artists to send me what they find interesting, what made them stop and pay attention on a news feed, social media news feed, and go from there, but be inspired by each other and continue this beautiful community that we're all in it together. And in the end, it all comes down to the music. So keep writing music, keep performing, and keep connecting with the audience that you want to hear your music.
Beautiful. I fully agree and could not have said it better. Ralph, as we're down to the last couple of minutes here, is there a thought, a suggestion, a comment that you would like to leave with all of our audience with here today before I ask you to do the benediction?
Yeah, sure. You got the ex-altar boy here, so that's. Are you serious? I'll do it.
Take it.
Biff, I start off every single class at Berklee telling my students, I get real serious. I'm in the front of the room and I look at all the eyes and I say, you got to understand, we don't need any more musicians. And then I take two steps back and I arrange something on my desk. And I said, and we certainly don't need any more songs. We have too many songs.
70,000 a day at Spotify.
Right. And then I say, and then they're freaked out because they're paying X amount for Berklee. They're in my class for 15 weeks and I'm just, saying there's no Santa Claus. So then I say, so listen, we're going to figure it out. And how we're going to figure out is why should someone care about you? Why should someone care about your song? And if you haven't figured that out, it's really hard to have a career in anything. So why should someone care about you? Figure it out. And, and to Sarah's point, I just mentioned Mick Jagger and B&H cameras in New York. I get inspired by everything around me. And I think artists need to do that. I think songwriters need to do that. Find the brands, find the artists, find Banksy. My God. Banksy, there's so much inspiration around us. Don't just stay in the folk music world. Don't just stay in the music world. There's inspiration everywhere. And that is why, that's how you could separate yourself. That's why you can make someone care, if you have the richness of all that stuff feeding into your heart and your soul and your mind, you know. But it's a privilege to be part of this community, and we do take care of each other. And this panel is part of it, you know. The idea is just to help our community, to uplift everybody, and boy, that's one thing that this community is all about. So thank you for everything.
Yes, sir.
Panelists.
And I'm going to call that our benediction for the afternoon.
There you go.
Yeah, beautiful closing words. I would like to thank Sarah and Carrie and Ralph for all the time they've devoted to putting this 90 minutes together. It takes more than 90 minutes, and for sharing their time this afternoon. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Ralph.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.